is the other reason why it's important to unplug for your business is that it will actually increase the evaluation of your business. Your clinic will be worth more, when you decide to sell, right? Right? Or when it gets appraised, Paul, like why is that? Why is that like, can you talk more about that?
Yeah, 100%. We and this goes at every level. It doesn't matter if it's a single clinic or 100 clinics. Nobody wants to buy a business where it's 100% dependent on the owner. Like truly, right? Because if the owner sells and retires and goes away, then the business goes with them too. And so when you do this and when your staff get in the habit of it, and when you have a leadership staff that can actually take over the business while you're away, that's way more valuable to me as a buyer than it would be if you were the end all be all, right? So I think it's a really important distinction to make for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and if this makes sense, type in retirement in the chat. By doing this will actually help you with your retirement. Whether it is 3 years from now or 20 years from now, these are things that you could do every single day to actually increase the valuation of your retirement. Type retirement in the chat if that makes sense, everyone. And so this is why you need to do it, right? Because the last thing, Paul, how many businesses have we seen over the years where it's so dependent on the owner that valuation is sliced in half, right? Even if it made great, even if it had systems, even if it had EBITDA, right? They had no team, to run it.
The irony is that a lot of clinic owners thought because it was their reputation and their value that they brought to the business that made the clinic more valuable, and it's the complete opposite. It is the complete opposite, right? Even the guys that we're talking to, like these publicly traded companies, hedge funds, pension funds, all of them do not want clinics that are owned and run by a single owner. They want staff of 5, 10, that sort of thing. They want org structure. They want leadership. They understand that it's a huge risk to them if it's all dependent on the owner, right?
Yeah.
I do think Elizabeth brings up a really important point, though. I don't know, Elizabeth, can you actually just voice that? Because I think everybody's sort of thinking this, right?
Yeah, I still treat patients. I'm trying to back off a little bit, but because the treating of the patients is what gives me joy, I'm not going to leave it entirely. But when I leave, the other therapist can only take so many of my patients on, so our income does drop. The same thing happens when other therapists leave as well. So now we're working on how can we bring in another therapist into the mix, and still, because we're in a finite space. So how can we do that and still, keep going? But that's the biggest thing for me, is that if I'm gone for more than 3 weeks, I definitely see it in the cash flow.
Mm-hmm. And then that becomes a really expensive holiday.
Oh, yes.
Right? If you factor in, you think, 3 weeks holiday, it's going to cost me this. No, it's going to cost you this plus the lost revenue.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? So it's oh my God, that is a really expensive holiday.
Yeah. And in the past, because I do have the administrative time, if we're really backed up, if somebody else is away, I can squeeze in a patient or two here and there, but my other therapists are already, that's all they do is their patient care time. So it's not like they can squeeze in more people. And certainly through COVID, we weren't able to, you just weren't allowed to have that many patients at once. Now, in Alberta, I think we can start double booking, but my staff don't feel comfortable doing that just yet because it didn't magically disappear July 1st. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's awesome that you recognize that, Elizabeth, and you're kind of taking the steps to work towards that. I think that's the key thing, that you are doing that. So good on you for kind of working towards that. I think that's awesome. I just want to comment on this. I think, I don't know, when we had the discussion about, retirement, and I said what the exercise I did is I kind of put on a buyer's hat. One of the questions, if I was a buyer, I would ask, when's the last time you took a vacation? How long did you take a vacation for? To me, if somebody said, well, I took, 4 weeks off and then I took 2 weeks, and And then you looked at those months from a revenue and you looked at the metrics. And if things were like flowing or growing, I'd be like, I'm in, I'll buy your business. Like that would be key things if I was a buyer that I would look at.
That's cool. I haven't even thought of that, but I'm gonna put that in. I'm gonna put that in my checklist for sure.
Like, doesn't that tell you a lot if you ask that question?
Yeah.
And then you looked at
When
those
was the
months.
last time you took a time off and let's go to your scoreboard?
And that
That is your
was-
normalized revenue.
And if it went,
Yeah.
Welcome to the
100%.
M&A team, Karen.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
That's added to the checklist.